Rome. The name itself conjures images of legions marching, gladiators fighting to the death, and emperors ruling over a vast domain. We think of marble statues, grand colosseums, and epic conquests. But the true foundation of this empire wasn't forged solely in the fires of battle. It was built on something far more mundane, yet infinitely more powerful. Paperwork. This is the story of the unseen Rome. The Rome of ink and parchment, of rules and regulations, of endless corridors filled with clerks and scribes. This is the story of the bureaucracy that held an empire together for 1,000 years. Forget the roar of the crowd in the amphitheater. Listen instead to the quiet scratch of a reed pen on papyrus. This was the real sound of power. In countless offices, from the heart of the city to the farthest provincial outpost, an army of administrators was at work. They were the engine of the empire, processing, recording, and archiving every detail of Roman life. Every citizen, every soldier, every taxpayer existed as an entry in a ledger. Births, deaths, marriages, property ownership were meticulously documented. The census, a monumental undertaking, wasn't just about counting people. It was about control. It determined tax obligations, military service, and social status. It was the empire's way of knowing everything about everyone. A vast database, written by hand. Look closely at these documents. They are not grand proclamations, but the everyday instruments of governance. A tax receipt from a farmer in Egypt. A military discharge certificate granting a veteran land and citizenship. A building permit for a new aqueduct. A legal summons for a merchant in Gaul. Each piece of paper, each clay tablet, was a thread in the intricate fabric of Roman law and order. This system was built on a strict hierarchy. At the bottom were the scribes, the librari, often slaves or freedmen, who spent their days copying documents with painstaking precision. Above them were clerks, actuary, who managed military records and logistics. Then came the tabulori, the archivists who guarded the state's memory in vast storehouses of scrolls. And at the top, magistrates and governors who made decisions based on the information that flowed up to them. This wasn't a world of heroic speeches or dramatic pronouncements. It was a world of procedure. Forms had to be filled out correctly. Seals had to be affixed. Copies had to be made and filed. A single misplaced document could delay a shipment of grain, halt the payment of a legion, or cause a legal dispute that could last for generations. The empire ran on routine. The law was the bedrock of this administrative state. Roman law was complex, detailed, and, in theory, applied to everyone. Legal experts, the jurists, produced voluminous commentaries, creating a sophisticated legal framework that dealt with everything from contracts and inheritance to criminal offenses. In courtrooms across the empire, it wasn't the sharpest sword that won the day, but the most well-reasoned argument, backed by written evidence and legal precedent. This obsession with documentation was what allowed Rome to govern such a diverse and sprawling territory. A governor in Britannia could issue an edict that was based on the same legal principles as one issued in Syria. The system provided consistency and predictability. It was slow, it was cumbersome, it was often frustrating, but it worked. It created a sense of shared order, a belief that even in the most remote corner of the empire, the rules of Rome applied. Consider the logistics of supplying the army. A single legion required tons of grain, equipment, and supplies every month. This didn't happen by chance. It was the result of a massive, coordinated effort managed by quartermasters and administrative staff. They tracked inventory, calculated needs, arranged transport, and ensured that every soldier was fed, paid, and equipped. The Roman war machine was as much a triumph of accounting as it was of military strategy. And then there was the tax system, the lifeblood of the state. Tax collectors, the publiani, were a constant presence in Roman life. They assessed property, recorded harvests, and collected duties on goods. This revenue funded the army, the construction of roads and buildings, and the entire administrative apparatus itself. It was an unpopular but essential part of the system, and every coin was tracked and accounted for. The physical tools of this bureaucracy were simple but effective. Ink made from soot and gum. Reed pens cut to a fine point. Papyrus from Egypt, or more durable parchment made from animal skin. Wax tablets for temporary notes. which could be smoothed over and reused. And everywhere, seals, official seals, family seals, personal seals. An impression in wax was a mark of authenticity, a guarantee that a document was genuine. It was the ancient equivalent of a signature and a notary stamp rolled into one. This world was largely invisible to the average Roman, yet it shaped every aspect of their existence. It determined the price of bread, the safety of the roads, and the justice they could expect in court. It was a system that valued precision over passion, order over charisma. The heroes of this Rome were not generals, but meticulous archivists. Their battlefields were not dusty plains, but quiet rooms filled with scrolls. Their victories were not measured in conquered lands, but in balanced ledgers and perfectly filed reports. When we look at the ruins of Rome today, the crumbling forums, the silent aqueducts, we are seeing the skeleton of this great administrative achievement. These structures were not built by emperors alone. They were planned, funded, and managed by a vast, anonymous bureaucracy. They stand as monuments, not just to imperial power, but to the quiet, relentless, and indispensable work of the clerks, accountants, and lawyers of the Roman Empire. This was the true secret to Rome's longevity. Not the strength of its armies, but the resilience of its institutions. The empire eventually fell, but its legacy of law, administration, and the power of the written word would endure, shaping the governments and nations of the world for centuries to come. The silent, tireless work of the scribes outlasted the emperors they served. The ink faded, the papyrus crumbled, but the idea of an empire built on order and records lived on. That is, the unseen, and perhaps the greatest legacy of Rome. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys into the hidden corners of history. Have you ever wondered where our modern laws come from? Why do we have concepts like innocent until proven guilty, or written contracts, or ebb and wills? The answer, in large part, lies thousands of years in the past, etched into stone and bound in ancient texts. Today, we're journeying back to the heart of an empire to uncover the incredible story of Roman law. A system so powerful and so profound that its echoes still resonate in courtrooms all around the world. Imagine standing in the Roman Forum, the bustling center of the ancient world. Amidst the clamor of merchants and politicians, a set of 12 bronze tablets stands for all to see. Before this, law was a mystery, held by the elite. But with the 12 tables, it became public, a common reference point for every Roman citizen, from the wealthiest patrician to the humblest plebeian. This was a revolutionary idea, that law should be known and accessible to everyone. It was the first step towards legal equality, a principle we cherish today. These tablets covered everything from property disputes and debt to family matters and public order. They were simple, sometimes harsh, but they laid the foundation for a society governed by written rules, not by the whims of the powerful. As Rome grew from a city-state into a sprawling empire, its legal system had to evolve. This is where the praetors come in. A praetor was a magistrate, a legal official, whose job was to interpret and apply the law. Each year, the praetor would issue an edict, a public declaration of how they would handle legal cases during their term. They weren't just blindly following old rules. They were adapting them, creating new legal remedies to address new problems. This flexibility was the genius of the Roman system. It allowed the law to grow and change with the times, a concept we now call legal precedent. Then came the jurists, the first true legal scholars. These weren't just judges. They were brilliant thinkers, philosophers of law. Men like Gaius Elpian and Papinian dedicated their lives to studying, debating, and writing about the law. Their opinions and interpretations became incredibly influential. They wrote thousands of volumes, creating a vast body of legal literature. They ask fundamental questions. What is justice? What is fairness? What are the natural rights of a person? They developed sophisticated legal concepts like contracts, negligence, and private property. Their work transformed Roman law from a simple set of rules into a complex, rational science. They were the architects of a legal system so detailed and logical that their writings would be studied for centuries to come. It was this intellectual rigor that gave Roman law its enduring strength and appeal. But as the centuries passed, this vast collection of laws, edicts, and scholarly opinions became a tangled mess. It was disorganized, often contradictory, and incredibly difficult to navigate. A legal crisis was brewing. The system that had built an empire was now threatening to collapse under its own weight. This is where one of history's most ambitious leaders steps onto the stage. The Eastern Roman Emperor, Justinian I. In the 6th century AD, from his capital in Constantinople, Justinian embarked on a monumental project to collect, codify, and clarify 1,000 years of Roman law. He assembled a commission of the finest legal minds, led by the brilliant jurist. Their task was immense, almost unimaginable. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. This masterpiece of legal codification had 4 parts. First, the Codex, a collection of all existing imperial laws, streamlined and organized. Second, the Digest, or Pandex, which was the crown jewel of the project. It was a massive anthology of the writings of the great Roman jurists, condensing thousands of books into 50. It was a library of legal wisdom, a treasure trove of reason and argument. Third, the Institutes, a textbook for first-year law students, providing a clear and concise introduction to the principles of Roman law. Finally, the Novellae, or New Laws, which included the legislation passed by Justinian himself. Justinian's code was more than just a legal cleanup. It was an act of preservation. He saved Roman legal genius from being lost to time. He created a single, authoritative, and coherent body of law that would become the cornerstone of Western legal tradition. Without Justinian, the world we live in today would be a very different place. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Roman law largely disappeared from Western Europe for several centuries. But it was not forgotten. In the 11th century, a copy of Justinian's Digest was rediscovered in a library in Italy. This rediscovery sparked a legal renaissance. Universities, starting with the one in Bologna, began to study Roman law with renewed fervor. They saw in Roman law a tool for building just and orderly societies. Its principles were adapted and integrated into local customs, creating what we now know as the civil law tradition. This tradition, directly descended from Rome, is the basis for the legal systems of most of continental Europe, Latin America, and many other parts of the world. Even in common law countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, Roman law's influence is undeniable. Concepts like torts, contracts, and jurisprudence all have deep roots in Roman thought. So, the next time you hear a lawyer talk about precedent, or sign a contract, or even just consider what it means to live in a society governed by laws, remember the Romans? Remember the stone tablets in the Forum, the patient work of the jurists, and the grand vision of they built more than just roads and aqueducts. They built a framework for justice that has endured for millennia. The silent courtroom, the sober judge, the heavy books of law, these are all legacies of an empire that understood that the greatest power of all is the power of a just, an ordered society governed by laws written not just for the powerful but for everyone. The story of Roman law is the story of our own quest for justice. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the ideas that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to explore. Until next time, stay curious. In the sprawling empire of Rome, power was not just built on legions and aqueducts, but on something far more fundamental. Money and the lifeblood of the Roman state, the engine that fueled its conquests and its magnificent constructions, was its vast and intricate system of taxation. It was a system that touched every life, from the wealthiest senator in his villa to the humblest farmer tilling a distant provincial field. But this was no simple matter of dropping coins into a state coffer. The story of Roman taxes is a story of power, of control, and often of crushing burden. Imagine a scene in Roman Egypt or Syria. The sun beats down on a dusty field. Men arrive, carrying measuring rods and ropes. They are the agrimensors, the land surveyors. But they are not here to plan a new temple or a road. They are here to measure, to record, to assess. Every parcel of land, every olive grove, every vineyard is meticulously documented. The fertility of the soil, the type of crop, the expected yield, all of it is noted down on wax tablets or papyrus scrolls. This is the first step in a relentless process. This is the census. The poll tax, the tributum capitis, was levied on the individuals themselves. It was a declaration that every person, simply by existing within the empire, owed a debt to Rome. While its application varied, some regions taxed only non-Roman citizens. Others taxed almost everyone. It was a constant and personal reminder of Roman authority. And then there were the indirect taxes, a complex web of duties that caught Romans at every turn of their economic lives. The portoria were customs duties levied on goods crossing the frontiers of the empire, or even moving between provinces. There was a tax on freeing a slave, the vicesima libertatis, a 5% tax on the value of the slave. There was a tax on inheritances, the vicesima hereditatium, also 5%, which famously only applied to Roman citizens, a clever way to tax the wealthy without appearing to burden them directly in life. At every market transaction, a small percentage, the centesima rerum venalium, a 1% sales tax, was due to the state. So how is this colossal amount of wealth collected? In the early days of the Republic, and continuing into the Empire, Rome outsourced the job. They used a system of tax farming. In return, they were given the authority to collect the taxes from the populace. Their goal was simple: to collect not just the amount they had paid the state, but as much more as they possibly could. This was their profit. The system was ripe for abuse. The Publicani and their agents descended on the provinces like a plague. They were backed by the authority of Rome, often with soldiers to enforce their demands. They could charge exorbitant interest on late payments, seize property, and drive families into debt slavery. The provincials had little recourse. Complaining about a tax collector to a Roman governor, who himself was part of the system, was often a futile and dangerous exercise. The silent resentment of a farmer handing over a large share of his hard-won grain, the fear in a merchant's eyes as his cargo was assessed, these were the unseen costs of the Publicani system. The scrolls in their offices weren't just lists of numbers. They were ledgers of human struggle. The Gospels in the New Testament mention tax collectors, and they are universally despised figures, classed alongside sinners. This wasn't just religious sentiment. It was a reflection of the harsh reality of daily life for many in the Roman world. These men were seen as collaborators, agents of an occupying power, growing rich on the misery of their own people. Over time, the emperors recognized that the rapaciousness of the tax farmers was not only cruel, but also counterproductive. A province bled dry could not be taxed again next year. It could lead to rebellion and instability, which was costly to suppress. Starting with Augustus, and continuing with his successors, the system was gradually reformed. The role of the publicani was reduced, and more, tax collection was brought under the direct control of imperial officials. Governors and their financial procurators became responsible for overseeing the process. This didn't necessarily make taxes lower, but it did make the collection process more standardized and, in theory, less arbitrary. The goal was no longer pure profit for a private company, but a sustainable revenue stream for the state. Yet, the burden remained immense. The Roman army, with its hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed from Britain to the Euphrates, needed to be paid, fed, and equipped. The massive bureaucracy that administered the empire required salaries, the bread and circenses for the population of Rome itself, the free grain dole, and the spectacular public games had to be funded. And emperors, of course, had their grand building projects. Temples, forums, triumphal arches, and palaces, all designed to project an image of power and prosperity, all paid for by the taxes of the empire. As the empire faced increasing pressure in the 3rd and 4th centuries, the tax system became even more oppressive. Diocletian's reforms at the end of the 3rd century attempted to create a more rigid. Farmers became tied to their ancestral plots, unable to leave, as the state needed their tax contribution from that specific piece of land. Sons were often forced into the same trade as their fathers to ensure the tax base remained stable. The story of Roman taxation is, in the end, the story of the Roman Empire itself, but it also reveals its fundamental weakness. It was an empire built on extraction, a system where the wealth of the provinces flowed inexorably towards the center, to Rome, and to the armies on the frontiers. When that flow was disrupted, when the provinces could no longer bear the weight, the entire structure began to creak and, eventually, to crumble. The silent faces of the taxpayers, etched in the reliefs and mosaics of history, tell a story not of glory, but of the relentless, grinding pressure that held an empire together until it couldn't anymore. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the Roman economy interesting, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the ancient world. Let us know in the comments what other aspects of Roman life you'd like to explore. See you next time. Have you ever stopped to think about time? Not just the ticking of a clock or the turning of a page on a calendar, but the very concept itself. How did we, as a civilization, decide to measure something so intangible, so abstract? Our modern lives are ruled by deadlines, appointments, schedules, but this intricate dance with time didn't just appear overnight. It's a story that stretches back thousands of years. A story of human ingenuity, observation, and our relentless desire to bring order to the chaos of existence. Let's journey back to the dawn of civilization. Imagine a world without watches, without smartphones, a world lit only by the sun and the stars. For our ancient ancestors, the sky was the first great clock. The most obvious and reliable timekeeper was the sun. As it journeyed across the sky, it cast shadows. And in those moving shadows, humanity saw a way to measure the day. As the day progressed, this shadow would shorten, swing around, and then lengthen again as the sun began to set. People learned to mark the positions of the shadow at different points in the day, giving them a rudimentary way to divide daylight into segments. It wasn't about precise minutes or seconds. It was about marking the key moments: mid-morning, noon, mid-afternoon. This was timekeeping in its most natural form, directly tied to the rhythm of the sun. The sundial was more than just a tool. It was a testament to our growing understanding of the cosmos and our place within it. But the day was only one part of the puzzle. What about the larger cycles? The changing seasons, the planting and harvesting of crops, the migration of animals, these were all governed by a longer rhythm. For this, ancient cultures looked to the moon and the stars. The phases of the moon provided a predictable cycle of roughly 29 days, giving birth to the concept of the month. As civilizations developed, they began to track these larger cycles with incredible ingenuity. Think of the great stone circles, like Stonehenge. While their exact purpose is still debated, many believe they were massive astronomical observatories, sophisticated calendars carved into the very landscape. The alignment of the stones often corresponds with significant solar events, like the summer and winter solstices. These weren't just monuments, they were public calendars, allowing entire communities to track the passage of the year and prepare for the changing seasons. Imagine standing among those colossal stones, watching as the sunrise on the longest day of the year aligns perfectly with a specific marker. It was a shared experience, a communal understanding of time that bound society together. As societies became more complex, so did their need for more detailed timekeeping. In ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, this need was driven by agriculture, religion, and bureaucracy. Priests needed to know the right time for rituals and festivals. Farmers needed to know the optimal time to plant and harvest, often tied to the annual flooding of rivers like the Nile. Administrators needed to organize labor and collect taxes. This led to the creation of more formal calendars. We see evidence of this carved into the walls of temples and public buildings. The Egyptians, for example, developed a calendar of 365 days, remarkably close to the actual solar year. They divided the year into 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 extra festival days at the end. This allowed for a predictable schedule for the entire kingdom. Public life began to be organized around this shared timeline. Festivals, markets, and civic duties were all marked on these public calendars for everyone to see. Time was becoming a tool for social organization, where too started to be structured by these early forms of timekeeping. Large-scale construction projects, like the pyramids, required the coordination of thousands of workers. While they didn't punch a time clock, their days were structured. The rising sun signaled the start of work, the shadow of the sundial marked a midday break, and the setting sun brought the day to a close. It was a rhythm dictated by nature, but organized by human administration. This was the birth of the workday, the ancestor of our modern 9. But sundials had a major drawback. They didn't work at night or on cloudy days. This limitation spurred the next great wave of innovation in timekeeping. Humans needed a way to measure time that was independent of the sun. This led to the invention of water clocks. A water clock worked by measuring the steady flow of water from one vessel to another. By marking levels on the receiving vessel, you could measure the passage of time, day or night. These were used in ancient Greece and Rome to time speeches in law courts and to regulate the night watches of soldiers. Another ingenious solution was the sandglass, or hourglass. Like the water clock, it used the steady flow of a substance in this case. Fine sand to measure a specific duration. While not as accurate for long-term timekeeping, they were portable and reliable for shorter intervals. These devices represented a crucial shift. Humanity was starting to create artificial time, a measurement that was separate from the direct observation of the heavens. For centuries, these methods, sundials, water clocks, star charts, and sandglass eyes were the primary ways we kept time. But the world was changing. The rise of trade, the growth of cities, and the increasing complexity of society demanded greater precision. The turning point came in the late Middle Ages with the invention of the mechanical clock. The first mechanical clocks were monumental constructions, housed in the towers of cathedrals and town halls. They didn't even have faces or hands at first. They simply struck a bell on the hour to call monks to prayer or to signal the hours to the townspeople. The sound of the clock tower bell became the new pulse of urban life. It regulated market hours, the start and end of the workday for craftsmen, and public gatherings. Time was no longer just observed. It was announced, broadcast for all to hear. It was a public utility, a shared beat to which the entire community moved. The transition was gradual. At first, mechanical clocks were set and corrected daily using a sundial. The old and new technologies worked hand in hand. But as the mechanics improved, with the invention of the pendulum and the balance spring, clocks became more accurate and, crucially, smaller. Grandfather clocks, and later, mantle clocks, became symbols of wealth and status. Having a clock in your home meant you were a person of order, of precision, of modernity. This privatization of time had a profound effect on how people lived. Instead of structuring their day around the sun or the town bell, individuals could now organize their own schedules with unprecedented precision. The family meal, personal appointments, and daily routines could be timed to the minute. This shift mirrored a broader change in Western thought, an increasing focus on the individual and the efficient management of one's own life. The final piece of our modern time puzzle was the standardization of the calendar. Throughout history, different cultures used different calendars, which made international trade and communication a complicated affair. The Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar, was a significant step, but it had a small inaccuracy that caused it to drift over the centuries. This was corrected in 1582 with the introduction of the Gregorian calendar. The system we use today, its adoption was slow and piecemeal, but it eventually became the global standard, a universal language of dates that connects the entire world. Now, think about our world today. We've moved from stone circles to digital calendars on our phones, from shadows on the ground to atomic clocks that are accurate to within 1 second over millions of years. Our work is no longer governed by the sun, but by office schedules, timesheets, and digital notifications. We've taken the abstract concept of time and divided it, quantified it, and integrated it into every aspect of our existence. The visual of an ancient sundial, casting a slow, deliberate shadow, smoothly morphs into the crisp, digital display of a modern clock. The rough carvings on a stone wall dissolve and reform as the clean grid of a Google Calendar. This journey from the shadow of an obelisk to the pixel on a screen is nothing short of remarkable. It's the story of our unending quest to understand and control our world, to impose order on the flow of existence. Every time you check your watch, schedule a meeting, or mark a date on your calendar, you are participating in a tradition that is thousands of years old. You are the heir to the astronomers, the priests, the engineers, and the artisans who dedicated their lives to answering a fundamental question: what time is it? The tools have changed, but the human impulse remains the same. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history of time. If you found this fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the stories that shaped our world. See you next time. Imagine stepping back in time, not to a battlefield with clashing swords, but to a quiet, orderly line. This isn't a scene from a Hollywood epic. This is the everyday reality of the Roman Empire's borders. Forget what you think you know about walls and legions being the only line of defense. The true power of Rome The glue that held its vast territories together was something far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful. Bureaucracy. It was a world run on paper, ink, and the authority of a simple wax seal. For centuries, we've pictured Roman frontiers as military zones. Maned be grim-faced soldiers staring out into the barbarian wilderness. And while soldiers were certainly present, the real gatekeepers of the empire were often civilians, administrators, clerks, and officials. Their weapon wasn't a sword, but a stylus. Their armor wasn't iron plate, but an intricate knowledge of law and procedure. The border was less a line in the sand and more a complex, layered system of control, a bureaucratic web that stretched from the misty shores of Britain to the sun-scorched deserts of Syria. In Tispideo, we're going to peel back the layers of myth and explore the fascinating and often overlooked world of Roman travel documents and border control. We'll see how a simple piece of papyrus or a wooden tablet could be more decisive than a legion, determining a person's fate, their freedom, and their future. After 25 years of loyal service, an auxiliary soldiera, non-citizen from a conquered province, was granted full Roman citizenship for himself and his descendants. He received a bronze tablet, a diploma, which was a certified copy of the official decree posted in Rome. This small, heavy document was his golden ticket. It was proof of his status, his rights, and his place in the Roman world. Imagine a veteran returning to his provincial hometown, proudly carrying this tablet. For those born into citizenship, proof was often established through birth registration. In Roman Egypt, for instance, parents were required to register the birth of their children with local officials. These declarations, written on papyrus, stated the names of the parents, the date of birth, and critically, their citizen status. Copies of these documents, authenticated with official seals, served as de facto birth certificates. They were vital for inheritance, for legal standing, and for proving one's right to be on the Roman side of any given checkpoint. But what about non-citizens? The vast majority of people in the empire weren't citizens, at least not until the Edict of Caracalla in 212 AD. They were provincials, foreigners, traders, and slaves. For them, travel was a different story. They needed different kinds of papers. A merchant carrying goods from Palmyra to Antioch might carry a customs declaration, a document detailing his cargo and showing he'd paid the necessary taxes and tariffs. These weren't just about revenue. They were a form of control, a way for the state to track the flow of goods and people. Then there were letters of introduction. In a world without instant communication, a letter from a powerful patron was invaluable. This letter would vouch for his character, explain his purpose, and ask for assistance. At a checkpoint, presenting such a letter, bearing the seal of a recognized authority, could smooth his passage immensely. The most official form of travel permit was the diploma, but this term was also used for official passes issued by the emperor or his governors. It was a sign of immense authority, and forging one was a serious crime. So you have your document. You arrive at a crossing point. It might be a bridge over a river, a mountain pass, or a gate in a city wall. What happens next? You join a queue. You see an official, a stationarius, or a customs agent, sitting at a wooden table. He's not a soldier in battle gear, but a civilian administrator, perhaps with a couple of guards for security. The air is tense. People wait, clutching their papers. Some look confident, others anxious. When it's your turn, you step forward. The official doesn't ask friend or foe. He asks for your papers. You hand over your wooden tablet, your papyrus scroll, or your letter. He examines it carefully. He checks the name, the origin, the destination. He looks at the seal. This is the crucial moment. Roman seals, made from wax impressed with a signet ring, were the primary method of authentication. AHO, official. Each wealthy individual had a unique ring. The image might be a portrait of an ancestor, a mythological scene, or the emperor's likeness. The official at the border would be trained to recognize the seals of regional authorities. A crisp, clear impression from a known signet ring meant the document was likely genuine. A smudge, a break, or an unfamiliar design would raise immediate suspicion. He might then ask you questions. What is the purpose of your journey? who can vouch for you in the next city. What goods are you carrying? Your answers had to match the information on your document. Any discrepancy could lead to further questioning, or even detention. We have records of these interactions. Papyri from Egypt preserved petitions from people who were detained, complaining of unjust treatment by border officials. It shows us this was a real and often stressful process. For those who were approved, the official might make a note in his own records and wave them through. The sense of relief must have been immense. For those who were rejected, the consequences could be severe. They might be turned back, fined, their goods confiscated, or, if suspected of being a runaway slave or a criminal, they could be arrested and imprisoned. It was a constant, low-level reinforcement of Roman order. The system said, "This land is Roman. We decide who comes and goes." This administrative network also allowed Rome to collect vast amounts of information. Records of who crossed, what they carried, and where they were going were a source of incredible data for the Roman state. They could track trade routes, monitor potential unrest, and hunt for fugitives. The border was not just a barrier, it was an information-gathering hub. Of course, the system wasn't perfect. Forgery was a constant problem. People would try to create fake documents or counterfeit official seals. Bribery was also common. A few well-placed coins could persuade a low-paid official to look the other way. And in the more remote parts of the empire, military patrols were still a necessary reality. But what's remarkable is how much of the empire, for so much of its history, was managed by this quiet, administrative machine. So, the next time you think of the Roman Empire, don't just picture legions marching in perfect formation. Picture the nervous traveler, his hands sweating as he fumbles for his papers. Picture the stern-faced clerk, his eyes scrutinizing a wax seal under the Mediterranean sun. Picture the silent power of a piece of papyrus, a document that could open the gates to the greatest empire the world had ever known, or slam them shut forever. This was the hidden machinery of Roman power, the bureaucracy that truly ruled the world. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into the world of Roman paperwork as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. Let me know in the comments what other overlooked aspects of the ancient world you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious. Ever feel like you're drowning in paperwork, trapped in a maze of forms, signatures, and endless waiting? Well, you're not alone. This feeling, this system, has roots that stretch back thousands of years, all the way to the heart of the Roman Empire. Imagine stepping back in time, not to the Grand Colosseum or the bustling Forum, but to a place far less glamorous, yet arguably more important at Roman Tabularium, their version of an archive or records office. The air is thick with the scent of papyrus and ink. Instead of humming computers, there's a quiet, rhythmic scratching of styluses on wax tablets and red pens on scrolls. Rows upon rows of clerks, known as scribi, are hunched over their work. They are the unsung heroes, the cogs in the immense machine of the Roman state. These weren't just simple these were highly skilled professionals. They were masters of shorthand, experts in law, and guardians of the state's memory. Every tax record, every military dispatch, every census return, every court ruling passed through their hands. They were organized into a strict hierarchy, from the junior clerks just learning the ropes to the senior decurions who oversaw entire departments. It was a career path, a way to climb the social ladder through diligence and precision, not just birthright or battlefield glory. Think about the sheer scale of it. The Roman Empire, at its peak, stretched from the misty hills of Britain to the sandy deserts of Mesopotamia. How do you govern such a vast and diverse territory? Not just with legions, but with information. You need to know who your citizens are, where they live, what they own. You need to collect taxes to fund your armies, your roads, your aqueducts. You need a standardized legal system that applies to a Spaniard just as it does to a Syrian. All of this requires a colossal amount of record keeping. It requires bureaucracy. The Romans were masters of systemization. They created forms, templates for everything from a will to a contract for selling a donkey. These documents were copied, filed, and stored in massive archives. Some were kept in wooden chests, others rolled up and tucked into cylindrical cases called capsi, all meticulously labeled. If a dispute arose over a piece of land in Egypt, A clerk in Rome could, in theory, retrieve the original deed of sale decades after it was written. This was the power of the written word, organized and institutionalized. But let's be real, it wasn't always a well-oiled machine. Just like today, there was red tape. A simple request could involve multiple offices, each with its own procedures, and of course, its own fees. There were frustrations, delays, and undoubtedly, moments when a Roman citizen felt just as lost in the system as we do. Today, satirists of the time, like Petronius, would poke fun at the pompousness and inefficiency of certain officials. It's a timeless complaint. Now, let's fast forward. The Western Roman Empire falls, and for a time, this centralized system shatters into 1,000 pieces. Europe enters the Middle Ages. Record-keeping becomes more localized, often managed by monasteries and feudal lords. The sheer volume and standardization of the Roman era are lost, but the idea, the necessity of it, never truly disappears. Kingdoms and city-states slowly begin to rebuild their own administrative systems, often borrowing from the Roman model they could piece together from surviving texts and traditions. The real explosion, the next great leap in bureaucracy, comes with the rise of the modern nation-state in the Renaissance and beyond. Monarchies become more powerful and centralized. They need to raise larger armies, collect more taxes, and manage growing populations. Suddenly, the demand for clerks, for records, for offices, skyrockets once again. Picture the change. The Roman scroll gives way to the bound book, then 2 individual sheets of paper. The quiet scribe's office is now a bustling chancery. The rhythmic scratching is joined by the thud of wax seals being stamped onto documents. Instead of Latin, official business is increasingly conducted in the vernacular French, English, Spanish. The sheer volume of paper is staggering. Palaces aren't just for living. They contain vast wings dedicated solely to administration. The Industrial Revolution pours fuel on the fire. Factories, railways, global trade, all of it requires regulation, contracts, and oversight. The state's role expands dramatically. It starts getting involved in education, public health, and social welfare. And every new responsibility creates a new department, a new set of forms, a new army of clerks. Now we're in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The office, as we might recognize it, begins to take shape. Rows of wooden desks with inkwells and blotting paper. The clerk is no longer a high-status scribe, but often an anonymous figure in a vast organization. This is the world Charles Dickens wrote about, a world of circumlocution offices, where the goal seems to be to obstruct rather than to help. This is also where we get the quintessential image of the bureaucrat. A man in a bowler hat with a briefcase. A cog in an impersonal machine. The invention of the typewriter brings a new sound to the office. The clatter of keys. It speeds up communication and standardization. Carbon paper allows for instant Capisa revolution in its own right. Filing cabinets replace chests and shelves, allowing for more efficient organization and retrieval of an ever-growing mountain of paper. The scale is now truly global. Empires and corporations alike run on these paper trails, connecting London to Hong Kong, New York to Mumbai. And then comes the biggest transformation of all, the computer. Slowly at first, then with breathtaking speed, the digital revolution sweeps through our offices. The clatter of typewriters fades, replaced by the soft click of keyboards and the hum of servers. The mountains of paper begin to shrink, replaced by terabytes of data stored on hard drives and in the cloud. The Roman scribe's stylus, the medieval monk's quill, the Victorian clerk's dip pen, and the 20th century secretary's typewriter have all merged into the keyboard and mouse. Our modern government office might look sterile and quiet compared to the chaotic paper-filled rooms of the past, but the core function is identical to that of the Roman tabularium 2,000 years ago. It is about gathering, organizing, and retrieving information to make the state function. The tax form you file online is a direct descendant of the wax tablet census record. The digital signature on a contract serves the same purpose as the intricate wax seal of a medieval king. The challenges are also surprisingly similar. We still complain about red tape, though now it might be a buggy website or a forgotten password instead of a lost file. We still worry about privacy and data security. Just as a Roman merchant might have worried about his sensitive business dealings being read by the wrong person, the system can still feel impersonal and overwhelming. But here's the thing. For all our frustrations, this long, unbroken chain of bureaucracy is what allows our complex societies to function. It's the invisible framework that underpins everything. It ensures your vote is counted, your property rights are protected, and that the traffic lights turn green. It's the system that organizes the response to a natural disaster and ensures pensions are paid. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. But it is, in its own quiet way, one of the most powerful and enduring inventions of human civilization. From a single scroll in a dusty Roman office to a server farm humming with the data of millions, the story of bureaucracy is the story of our attempt to bring order to the chaos of human affairs. It's not always perfect, but it's always there, quietly, tirelessly, keeping the world running. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys into the hidden histories that shape our world.